It's the month of Trinidad. We talk Trinidad Chambliss. In this month of February, we also talk with Daylan Flowers about all the other sports around the Ole Miss campus that is going on right now. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member as well. We're proud to be a part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Now it's the number one sports podcast network in America. That's because of fans like you taking in content like this, and we can't be more appreciative of that. On today's show, we will talk about the month of Trinidad and how this just changed everything for Ole Miss football moving forward. We'll also talk a little baseball, a little basketball, a little women's basketball, just kind of relax a little bit on this Monday afternoon. All that and more is coming up on today's Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube, and a special hello to our insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is, your team every day. Remember, we're free and available on all the podcast apps and YouTube. This episode is brought to you by Mazda. The same drive that we put into every detail, wins define the moment. Putting in the work, well, that defines you. Stay tuned for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward. There's more to Mazda because there's more to you. All right, so Daylan, one thing that is kind of interesting to me, with everything that is going on, football season should have been over, 2 months ago, but February was still all about Trinidad Chambliss to me. He is the story of the month. Him being eligible made Ole Miss a national championship level contender in the fall. It's still all about Trinidad Chambliss, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's interesting to think. Actually, shout out to Michael Katz. I read one of his articles the other day. And it was kind of just skimming the entire 2025 season. I actually saw something that popped in my phone the other day, and I made a tweet after Trinidad had actually originally committed to Ole Miss, and there were just a lot of comments talking about, who is this guy? Is Austin Simmons not getting the job done, and blah, blah, blah. And the caption of the tweet that I made was the comments were hilarious. And so to sit back in February of 2026, after everything that has transpired over the last 6, 7, 8 months, it's really been funny in a way, but it's also been very blessings to me to be able to be a part of it. But I think what's exciting about this is none of this would be as big as it was if Trinidad Chambliss did not perform at the level that he did this past season. And when I say that, it's easy to do that in the regular season, but the fact that Ole Miss under Pete Golding, a first-time head coach, dominated Tulane the way they did, and then went to the Sugar Bowl and beat Kirby Smart in Georgia, which is a guy that's won multiple national championships, and then competed at the highest level and was a few seconds away from, defeating Miami and going to the college football national championship. So I want to say that doesn't matter, if this is, another story, but I think just the image that Trinidad Chambliss has made for himself over the last year, and as well the way that Ole Miss fans have also represented him. Like, I think I told you this a little while ago, but everywhere I go in the city, I see a Trinidad flag. Everywhere I'm in an event for a sporting event, I see a Trinidad flag. It's become like a really big thing in the city of Oxford, and it's become like honestly a traditional thing now for Ole Miss fans to have some type of Trinidad merch flag around the city. So it's incredible to see. But I also think, we talk about this situation and how important it was for Trinidad and Ole Miss, but I think it may be very important to also understand the importance that it will have in the near future for current athletes. I'm not sure, I can't give a specific example, but I really think this will benefit some guys down the road that may go through a similar situation that, are coming through different ranks of college athletics and may have gone to, different situations that may necessarily not have been documented properly or, et cetera, et cetera. But when they get to the level, when they get the opportunity, they now have seen a situation such as Trinidad Chambliss has gone through court, continue to be denied a lot of times, but continue to fight, and then obviously got his eligibility. So I thought it was exciting for that because we see so many athletes that have actually gone through these things behind the scenes, and it's just not as notable because they have not created the fame, I guess, or the notoriety that Trinidad Chambliss has had. So it's exciting because I think it's giving Ole Miss the news and respect that they honestly deserve, because like you said, with him coming back, this is a team that is now much watched TV come the fall. This is much watched news to be able to cover Ole Miss once again, and I think it's also important for these players because it's going to be a heck of a team. I'm really excited to see and get around this team next month when spring things start kicking around and seeing some of these new guys that are here for the early spring portion, and some of the guys that may have been freshmen this past season didn't get much of an opportunity, such as off the top of my head, Caleb Cunningham, Chicago Mills Knight, seeing some of those guys and what type of roles they're going to be in early on, and just seeing how their growth has kind of transformed in the last few weeks.
One thing's interesting to me. You have a quarterback, running back, and a kicker on this team that at the very minimum, the worst possible situation, they're in serious consideration to be the best player at their position in college football. Ole Miss is, as a university, in that category. And Pete Golding, he made a bet going into this transfer portal cycle. He was going to retain Lucas Carnero. He was going to retain Ke'Juan Lacy. He was going to retain Trinidad Chambliss. And he was going to spend on the defense. And you look at the defensive players that were brought into Ole Miss, that unit has a chance to be fairly special with the unit that we just talked about that might have the three best players at their position in college football. I know everybody wants to keep an even keel about the way the roster looks because you don't want to just overly hope what was going on. This team's in a position to do something so special that they've honestly never done.
I love that point that you bring up, because I thought going back to fall camp last year, I think there were two major concerns, which was the offensive line and how the secondary was going to perform throughout the season. I think that as the season opener for Georgia State last year kind of got closer, I think less questions kind of came abroad for the secondary, and more questions kind of focused on what the offensive line was going to look like, especially after those first two games. Now that I look at it, I think Pete Golding had accumulated a staff very quickly in terms of the changes that were on the offensive side of the ball, and also giving those guys freedom in terms of JDB and Austin Thomas as well to kind of allow things to go through their system because Pete trusts them. But when I look at the defensive side of the ball, there are a plethora of guys that I'm excited about. But I think one of the major concerns from this past year's defense that I personally had was the speed on the outside. I think that there were, great players on the outside, but I think there lacked, moments of speed in terms of getting on the inside and making quick moves to kind of force a quarterback to maybe do something uncomfortable, have to step in a pocket and allow guys on the inside to make those plays. But I thought speed on the outside was very lackluster last year, which caused Ole Miss to be poor in the run game, but as well allow opposing quarterbacks to at times make something out of nothing, and when plays look like they were dead, they actually weren't. And so I think one of the big marquee pickups for Ole Miss is the edge transfer from Oregon, Blake Purchase. I think his size and speed as well makes him a very dynamic player, and he's a guy that I like to call Chris Poopall Jr. He was an eraser, and I kind of like to reference Blake Purchase as that too. And when I say eraser, I mean a guy that just comes in and shuts things down. Like he likes to get dirty. He likes to tackle people, and I think he's going to be very vital in the run game in doing that, because I think once Blake Purchase gets going, then opposing offenses have to respect him so much that they start tending to double team at him, which will allow Will Eccles and Cam Franklin in the middle to have more one-on-one situations and allow them to be more favorable in those situations. So I think that was a big pickup for Ole Miss, but I thought overall the linebacker room was going to be a huge concern going out of this past year. Ole Miss did really well at that, and not only just getting good players, but getting depth. I think Keaton Thomas is going to be the lead guy, but there are a collection of other guys who will provide good run defense, good zone coverage, good man coverage when needed as well, being able to get downhill and stop the run, be able to kind of drop back and play the pass game as well. But as well, watching a lot of the guys on film that have kind of come into that linebacker room, they all tackle in the open field really well. And that's something you have to do when you're in the linebacker position, especially the way Pete Golding likes to play. And so I think that when you look at the building of the defense this year, and I think it's also noticeable to notice that this was a top 30 pass defense last year, and they're going to continue building on that this year in terms of just getting guys in front of them better. If you bring Trinidad Ke'Juan back and you have, a pretty returning, really strong special teams with Lucas Carnero and Oscar Bird, then you're setting yourself up in great position if you're Ole Miss once again.
All right, when we come back, we were going to talk about the linebacker position specifically and the cornerback position we just brought up, because Ole Miss has some players coming back as well that were JUCO guys, Cedrick Beavers, Raymond Collins coming back, that many Ole Miss fans just assumed that they would be graduated at this point, but they are still on the roster. We'll talk about that as soon as we come back next. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill, well, that is still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you're still trying to make the right hire, this is the job for Sponsored Jobs. Indeed, Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for, whether skills or experience or location. So you're not just hoping for the right candidate stumbling across your post. Now, here's a stat that says it all. In the minute that I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed Sponsored Jobs. So when the right person when you need the right person to cut through the chaos, this is the job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. And listeners to this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help you get the premium job status you deserve at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and show support by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? This is a job for Indeed Sponsored Jobs. Hey, do us a favor, like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Subscribe to the podcast on whichever audio podcast you're listening to and give it a 5-star review. It costs nothing, but it keeps all of this free. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network in America. If you haven't already, go check out our Everydayer Club. They have access to an ad-free audio feed on Locked On Ole Miss, compatible with Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and basically every other major podcast app. You get an invite to the members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. I'm in there from time to time, and I will also give you an invite to my Locked On Ole Miss private Discord server if you join that as well. So go to lockedonolemiss.supercast.com or tap the link down in the show notes to learn more. All right, Daylan. One thing's interesting. I was looking at the roster today, and I was researching defensive ends because tomorrow morning we're going over the edge players, talking Cam Franklin and Blake Purchase and Landon Barnes and all those guys. But whenever I was looking at that, I noticed that Raymond Collins was still on the roster. I noticed that Cedrick Beavers was still on the roster. And that is two players that I assumed was going to contribute a year ago. Now they kind of have an opportunity to be the person that at least gets on the field. I realized with the addition of Jay Crawford, Antonio Kite, who was undoubtedly the best cornerback on Ole Miss's roster last year, it's going to be hard for somebody like Cedrick Beavers to take that next step because the number 1 and number 2 corner is kind of all taken care of. But this is depth, in my opinion, that we haven't been accounting for, and it's good depth. And when they've been called on to play, they've made plays.
Yeah, I think what's kind of important to kind of acknowledge about guys in the secondary especially is, like you said, sometimes those 1 or 2 spots, you kind of early on, you think some of these guys, who's going to be the number 1 and number 2 guys. But I think as the season went on, we kind of realized that when you're playing in this playoff now, that it doesn't matter if you only got 5 appearances in the regular season and minimal snaps. You may be needed in those postseason games for Ole Miss. And I think that when I look back at it, I don't want to necessarily say this is a guy that had minimal snaps, but I thought Ke'Juan Lacy kind of was, I think, undervalued from a lot of Ole Miss fans this past season in terms of, I guess, numbers wise, but I thought he played really strongly throughout the season. I think there were a lot of times that as well he was kind of put in one-on-one situations and he did get beat. But I remember the Miami game, the interception was huge in terms of momentum and giving the ball back to Ole Miss and late in the situation. But I think you're going to see guys like Cedrick Beavers that you know kind of gave an example to that may necessarily be beneficial later on in the season. Number one, because he's been here, he knows the system, and he knows what it takes to play at a high level under Pete Golding here. But I think Cedrick Beavers is also very versatile. And I think the same thing with Raymond Collins. I know we barely, got the opportunity to watch much of them this past season, but they did make some appearances. I obviously had the opportunity to watch them in fall camp last year. And they're not just on the team for no reason. They can be very influential in games. And I think that you're going to see some of those guys like those two actually get more opportunities this year, because I think Ole Miss reloaded a lot defensively, and I think it was something that was of importance for Pete Golding in terms of some of the players that were lost. But a lot of things that Pete Golding probably didn't like what he saw last year. I don't necessarily think that Ole Miss really wants to run that 3-man rush anymore. I think they kind of want to put four guys on the line attacking the quarterback and be a little bit more aggressive and getting downhill. And I think with guys like Raymond Collins on that line will provide a little bit more maturity in terms of the environment that's already here for Oxford. But I think as well, they're hungry. I think that they feel like they deserve that opportunity to be the starting guys, and that because they've been here and they know the system and they've paid their respects, they're going to continue working behind the scenes. So when the time comes in the fall for them to play and get those opportunities, when that moment comes, they're going to be ready and prepared to do what they can. So I think it's exciting to notice, because we get so caught up in the portal nowadays, and it's, you're trying to learn new guys every year. You're trying to basically learn a new team every year, that some of these guys that have been here for a little while, but may necessarily not be at the front pace of, the team name or the team roster, kind of get dealt with behind the scenes in terms of respect from, I guess, media and the fans. But these guys have been really, really important to this team over the last few years.
And with the lack of a spring transfer portal window, now that the spring window has gone away, you got to have a spring game this year, right? Like an old-fashioned, they need to introduce fans to these players, and spring is the perfect time to get the relationship. You're going to shut everything down in the fall, at least give people spring, right?
Yeah, I think it's very important, like, because the mention you just said is what I kind of said, that in a way, it's beneficial for teams like Ole Miss, because there are basically, in a way, no excuses not be able to reload and revamp your team even after you lose so much like Ole Miss did this past season, because the portals allow teams to revamp and get to the same level they were the year before or higher, with the acquisition of the transfer portal in recent years. So I think it's also important to realize that these fans, they only get a year with some of these guys sometimes. And I think that it's beneficial for the fans to really make better connections with them in the springtime. And I think that's been a fault for Ole Miss over the last few years for obvious reasons. But I think it's important because, like you said, the media, we are really the only ones that are getting the opportunity before the season starts in the fall to really see these guys up and close and personal, learn about these guys, talk with these guys, and we do our best to bring that to life to people. But that spring game is very, very vital. I remember, again, I think I've talked about this with you, but that was my first time really being introduced with you and being brought on the show, and for people to really be able to see what the saga was like throughout that time, what the competition was like, who were going to be the guys, who was going to step up, who were some of the guys that maybe we didn't know about but look really, really good in the spring game. And throughout that entire summer, we're like, okay, we need to remember this guy. We need to remember this guy. That's what the spring provides. It brings so much anticipation, and it also now brings so much familiarity for fans to players, because it's important. I think when you're out there, and you're a fan and you're wanting to support your defense on third down, but you didn't get to see them too much in the spring, you're like, who is this guy? It's the strong safety position. He's a transfer, but who is he? So I think it's very important for that. But also, I think the spring game really gives the justification for guys that are coming into this new system and they're trying to figure out exactly how to feel on a real field, exactly where I need to be at, and what type of competition I can expect in this conference, because you're going to be heads up every weekend when it comes to fall time.
Yeah, and depending on the practice access at spring football, whenever that begins, Daylan will have practice reports from time to time, and we'll talk to Michael Katz and all that, just like we always do. All right, when we come back, We're going to talk to Daylan about the other sports that are around campus. Yes, there's some sports going on, including baseball. Dom Decker hitting a home run, the leg problem, the tiredness of the women's basketball program, and we'll talk men's program as well. So stick around for that. This is Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who know there's more than the score than what's on the screen. Dom Decker hit a home run in a sweep of Missouri State over the weekend. He just plays winning baseball. You are better for him being on the field, having a player like Dom Decker. I'm convinced of that. He reminds us what it really takes to raise the bar. It's that extra work on the field or court, dialing in every detail, giving it that extra fire, that grit that I never quit. We put that same passion into every model. Highlights make the real. What it took to get there makes it count. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you. Be sure to get to a Mazda dealership and test drive one today. Also, if you ever wanted that experience in the NBA Finals to see them live and in person, FanDuel is giving you that opportunity to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for two. That's right. Flights, tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about which team can make a deep run, well, this is perfect for you to do that. I love futures this time of year, whether it's picking a team to win the championship or grabbing a conference title. It adds that extra layer of excitement to every game down the stretch. And now you can pick cash, but you can also get your way to the NBA Finals. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for your chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Daylan, one thing's interesting about this. You were at the baseball game this weekend. Dom Decker, his first collegiate home run. He's my guy. He's an ultimate dirtbag playing baseball. I'm a huge Dom Decker fan, but this baseball team, at this point, when the pitching's not there, they're able to slug a little bit. When the hitting's not there, they pitch it real well. And when you look at whatever happens, they're 8-0 at the moment, and they just find ways to win ball games. And that's kind of the story of this baseball team right now.
Yeah, I think, watching yesterday, I love Dom Decker leading at the batting order. I think he provides a lot of the quality that is very dynamic to start the batting order for Ole Miss. He did get that first career home run. I think the win helped him out a little bit, but nonetheless, happy for him. And I think that will hopefully provide a little bit of spark for him moving forward. I thought Colin Reuter looked really well over the weekend. And Joe Udemark is continuing to do what I think all Ole Miss fans expect him to do. But like you mentioned a great point that I love, because I think Sunday offense really, it was, kind of struggling consistency-wise. I think Dom Decker got that home run in the first inning, then I don't think they kind of really got to hit it to the fifth or sixth inning, if I'm not mistaken, and then had to provide some quality moments from Colin Reuter and Joe Udemark and Braden Randall. It kind of, really made a clutch moment at the end of the game as well. But, you look back at the first two games, I thought the offense performed much better. I thought Fern was finding his stride, and also I'll give props to Fern. I think Will is seeing the plate really well, and I'm seeing that from the entire team as well. I'm seeing a lot more plate discipline than I was last season. I think that there are moments where you're reading that plate discipline and you're getting that pitch. Now they are kind of hitting and missing right now, but it's still early on, so I'm not going to really sit here and say I'm concerned about that. But I'm seeing much better plate discipline from the boys this year. I think the infielding has to get better, though, if you want to compete with the SEC. I think that there were some errors over the weekend that I think could have been cleaned up a little bit better, and throws that didn't necessarily need to be made instead of trying to make that big play happen. But that'll come better with time and just gelling more as a team. But I love the point you make, because Will Libber came in Sunday, I think ran through 5 innings and gave up a few hits, but kind of kept it minimal against Missouri State. And then Walker Hooks comes in for 2 innings, 3 straight strikeouts, and 4 overall. And then I thought the momentum just really kept going in the later parts as well. So I think Ole Miss is finding that stride, and these early games are very important to kind of understand who are going to be the guys you can rely on and once conference play starts to really set you up for success. Because I think, honestly speaking, the SEC may be as deep as it's ever been this year in baseball. And I know that may be wild to say because the SEC has had some really good years, especially over the past couple of years. But the SEC this year is going to be really, really dynamic in my personal opinion. Ole Miss has a really, really tough schedule. But I think that expectations are high, and I think there is a lot of veteran leadership on this team, and I think that some of the guys that are here have been through the ranks. They've been through the losing seasons. They've been through, the good portion of Ole Miss baseball as well, and are ready to provide high quality baseball for Ole Miss fans. And I think they have the opportunity to do that. They just have to find the consistency and balance between both things. But so far, like you said, when things aren't going well pitching wise, they found offensively a little bit more consistency. But yesterday, it wasn't necessarily getting the right attitude of momentum offensively, but the pitching was really, really monumental.
All right, about 1 minute on this answer. Coach Yo got beat by about 40 points at South Carolina. They're completely out of gas at the moment. How can she get their legs back before the SEC tournament in March Madness?
I just need some rest right now, man. They've got a game coming up on the road Thursday against Georgia. I actually talked to Coach Quinn Hillsman today. For people that don't know, Sunday was against South Carolina. That was their 5th game in 10 days. I mean, that's just a lot on any team, men's, women's, whatever you're playing. That's a lot on any team. I just think they need a few days to rest and obviously keep watching film. But I think they're going to be just fine. They played a gauntlet of a schedule over the last 4 games. And, believe it or not, I don't think that necessarily those losses got in their head much, which is going to be very important. You can't allow that to get in your head. You got to have a short-term memory and just forget about it and learn it from it and be better about it. I think those games provided exactly what Ole Miss needed. How do you compete against some of the best teams in the country? Because you're going to have to face them in the SEC tournament and in March Madness. And so you have to be mentally stronger for it. And I think you just have to understand you have to open up things a little bit more offensively, and Ole Miss will be just fine moving forward.
All right, Daylan, thank you so much for stopping by, and we'll talk to you next week, bud.
All right, appreciate you guys.
Take care. Thanks again for tuning into the Locked On Ole Miss podcast. We're going to continue to talk about football, spring football. We're going to talk about this baseball team a lot as it goes along. So make sure you subscribe and follow the show so you can get all of the latest episodes. We're on all the social channels, so check that out as well. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get Locked On Ole Miss ad-free, plus members-only Discord access, and more. Head to LockedOnOleMiss.supercast.com to join the club. For those of you on video, we're going to send you to the first ever 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel on audio. Make sure you find a second listen, either Locked On College Football or Locked On SEC are both excellent choices. Hotty toddy, everybody. Tomorrow, we're going to go over the defensive ends in our introduction to the roster as well, and we'll talk about some other stuff that's going on. 3 things I think that Pete Golding has to get accomplished in spring practice. We talk about that as well. So stick around. We will talk to you later. Hotty toddy, everybody.